Where to begin? Where to begin? Well, I guess we could begin from the start. I get to a new city. I'm looking for work later on. I managed to get a job in 2017, and I managed to keep that job, working well in my job for 8 years, working at like a food pantry or something. And I can tell you with certainty that I took pride in my work and all that. And then just like that, it gets ripped away. And how does it get ripped away? Well, because of Trump. Because of some fucking asshole who doesn't deserve his position. And he takes away my money, the money I earned, the money he's just getting because he's a stupid ass idiot. But let me back it up, right? Let me back it up. Let me back it up. And really talk about how demoralizing it is to have something that you worked hard at, a job, whatever it is, and then it's just taken away from you. And personally for me, I looked at that as a terrible, terrible situation because I couldn't like really imagine going and working at, like, let's say a Walmart or something. I had worked that job for 8 years and I was really happy with the work that I had put in. When you're working day in, day out, regardless of how long you work, and if you care about the work you're putting in, it's going to matter to you. The mistake that I made was I had obsessed and fixated on the job. Do the job, be the John Cena of the company, do whatever you got to do. And in doing that, I didn't attend to other things in my life at the time. I can go into the next job better off, but lesson is learned. I can't tell you how fucked up it is to go into something feeling like, oh, well, whatever, it is what it is. And then eventually, gradually over time, warming up to it, liking it, enjoying your time, all that. And then, as of March 31st of this year, it gets stolen from you. The job ceases to exist just because of some piece of shit in a White House. It's something that I can't really sit there and say that I was, gonna bounce back from as easily, even if I feel, oh, I could bounce back from these things well. No, it's just I struggled with, dealing with the fact that I had not attended to other things in my life at the time. Other aspects of my life fell to the wayside. And it didn't matter if I talked about this to family or anything like that. You would think it would, but no, it didn't. It was an isolated, lonely feeling, like I was on an island and I couldn't escape. And the one thing that kind of kept me going was, oh, well, I can get back from this, and that's good. You got to find something to motivate yourself. But when you look at the working class and what all the levels to it, and then you look at people that are outside of it, like influencers on YouTube and all that, you can't help but be a little bitter about your situation, even if you don't dwell on it. You can't help. I think it's human to be bitter about that, to be a little, angry, more so than a little, And it just takes time to really bounce back from that. The advice I'd give to somebody if they asked me is basically just find things to motivate yourself and then really keep reinventing the wheel on that, because there's nothing more demoralizing than realizing you spent 8 years, you didn't spend your money well, you don't have anything to show for it financially, but the work ethic showed, all that other stuff showed. But it's still demoralizing because you have to reset from day one, from this square one. Now you got to go and redo everything. I can't sit here and talk about that eloquently as much as I'd want to, no, because it's just like they cut you off at the knees, and now you got to go back and do this whole thing again. There are people that work jobs for like a year or whatever, and maybe they get the benefit of like something else helping them out. Maybe they can become a YouTube influencer. Who knows? You know, and good that they can put in that work at that job. But when it gets stolen from you, the way it was with me, I can't help but just be angry. And when I think about what caused it, which is a piece of shit in the White House cutting funding from things that he had no business giving a fuck about cutting because he didn't care about any of it, it makes me think, well, shit, that assassin that failed in killing him, could he have done the job correctly? Could he have fucking taken care of business? What the fuck? What the fuck? What was the wind direction not working? You didn't account for the wind, the wind, all that, the wind resistance and shit. You didn't light up the scope right, man. What the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? But you can't help but feel that way. Maybe not that toxic. Maybe not. Hopefully not. But it's just a disgusting pit in your stomach is formed when you just feel that bitterness, and it just eats away at you, gnaws away at your good intentions, at your desire to regroup and redo things. I can't sit here and act like that wasn't affecting me when I lost it, because I lost my job and I'm nearly 30, I got to get myself together as any man or woman should, and then I'm doing my best to do that, and I feel like I'm, chipping away at it, all that. But when you're nearly 30 and you don't really think about the age aspect, but you think of how people just coast by, like if you look at the YouTube influencers, they coast by in life because of their circumstances, because of what they've built, or maybe not really built too hard, but they've lucked into, whatever it is, right? And you look at the fact that it's hard to get a job at any level of employment, and the economy and all this other shit, that if you look at it from the top to the bottom, it's rotten all the way through. And there's no replacing it. So you can only work within it. But within that system is your ability to be able to work within it seamlessly. And I feel like, yeah, I could do well in whatever job I do, and do a good job, hard work, all that. But just like anybody else, you may not want to, deal with that, but you got to swallow that bitter pill and all that. And it doesn't matter if you want to like regroup as much, because you're not really given that luxury. It matters to you or I if trying to do it, but in the business sense, you got to go. You got to go, snap to it. You got to go. You can't just stop. You can't just take a breather. I remember when I lost the job, I was trying to get on unemployment. And then I realized that I couldn't, because it would hurt me. And since I'm a disabled Black Mexican man, I'm an African American mixed man, whatever, I'm at disadvantages here. Not bringing up the race card, no, but these disadvantages are inherent because of the fact that, your circumstances, not because of anything else. And then the circumstances are fucked. So all you can do is keep moving forward. And within that mantra of keeping moving, keeping yourself moving, and you keep moving forward, there's a loss of hope somewhere in there a little bit, because you hope to be able to take a breather and regroup, but you don't get the luxury of having all the time you would want, or even a fraction of the time that you would want to be able to do that. So when I see like YouTube influencers or whatever, being able to get what they get and coast through life basically, yeah, they got their own problems or whatever, but they're not like you or I. They are not like us. They can just coast on by while we're over here slaving away to make a living, to make things work, to make a difference that can amount to something that we can be proud of. And I feel like, yeah, I'm proud of the work that I put in, but I'm also resentful of the fact that not that I have to put in work to get another job, not that I have to, do the routine again, though that is a little part of it, of course. It's more about the fact that you feel so conflicted on some Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker shit. You feel conflicted because a part of you knows you can do the job, and then the other part of you knows you need to take a break to relax for a second and regroup and take stock and say, okay, all right, like we got this. But you don't get that luxury. And then you're left with the option of giving up. Me personally, I'm not going to be giving up anytime soon, if ever. But it's a tempting thing to do, because it's always easier to be angry and resentful and tear things down and give up and all this stuff. It's always easier to do that than it is to do what I'm trying to do, what other people are trying to do, which is keep it moving forward, keep it going, make some things that you can be proud of here, put in the work, good honest day's work, and call it a day and be happy about it as best you can be. But when you look at the way things are going, with how people can just, throw themselves on whatever online platform they are on and try to get money from that, it shows you the divide. It shows you the parting of the seas, so to speak, of the normal person, the disabled community, all of whatever communities you're a part of, the people that are just putting in work, and then the people that are just trying to coast, and the people that can coast, and the people that don't have the benefit of any of that, and they just can't do anything for themselves because their circumstances are that fucked that they're just unable to be able to get themselves out of the hole they're in. And I sympathize with that. When I went and did my job for 8 years, that first year, I didn't give a shit about the job, but then I slowly but surely cared about it. And then I had my mother at the time, at the time, LOL. My mother in general, I'm just fucking around with my words over here, LOL. No, not, forgive me, guys. The fact is that I'm trying to stay put together here and not be super emotional about it. My mom was telling me, oh, you were settling, you were settling for that job. And I couldn't help but be upset, because yeah, sure, I could agree with you to an extent that, yeah, I'm settling. But the other options, they weren't looking good. You're working at Walmart or working at some other random place in the community. It's going to be miserable. And sure, you swallow that bitter pill of misery and, keep him pushing. Misery business. Shout out to Paramore, you keep it moving. But within all of that hard work and effort and ability to be able to keep yourself going and keep yourself motivated and keep yourself positive, is got to stay positive, all that, you just feel worse off, when I lost that job, I freaked out, because I realized that I wasn't attending the things that I needed to attend to. And I'm man enough to admit that I made some mistakes and I had to correct things. I sold off game consoles to fucking GameStop of all places because I was freaking out and I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Oh my fucking God. I was struggling. I got myself right and I said, okay, we gotta chill out. But I could understand why I felt that way because I finally had no other choice but to look at the other parts of my life that I wasn't attending to. I had to take a close look and really analyze what was wrong and what was still right, but a lot of it was wrong. And I feel like when you see all these YouTubers that just get to coast, which is a lot of them, there's a disconnect from reality, but also a disconnect from the common person. And that disconnect is never, that gap is never bridged. There's no, I'm like you guys, though they try to fake it. They're not good actors enough to fake that, so not gonna work. But it's one of those things where you look at things from top to bottom and you say, okay, well, where's my place in that? How can I operate within that? And you're left with the only conclusion you can come to. There's other conclusions, but they all lead to the same thing, which is that you gotta swallow the bitter pill and keep it pushing. And of course, I wouldn't blame anybody, including myself, for being bitter about that, to an extent. You don't let it affect your professionalism. You don't let it affect your day-to-day work or anything like that, hopefully. But it's only human to want more than what you have or to want something that you could have. So when I see people, basically, like begging and subscriber begging and then doing the, doing the whole, you guys aren't subscribed, like 90% of you people aren't subscribe to me, all of that. Like, yeah, it's the YouTube algorithm stuff, but like, it goes without saying, if your content is good, if your content is, worth their entertainment value and they're worth their attention, worth their time to them, they're going to, hopefully at least, go and subscribe and go and like and go and comment. Would I like you to do that on my video? Sure, great. But it's not going to be something that I'm going to be out here like, oh my God, get me to 1,000 or 500 or 2,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 or whatever subscribers so we can make more videos and stuff like that. I feel like, yeah, I understand the hustle. Not hard to understand. But it just feels a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say pathetic, that's mean, but it does kind of come off that way a little bit. It feels like the desperation is showing through my, like I can feel it through my screen, like reaching out to me. I can feel it reaching out to me like, yeah, please. I can feel it. And, I don't feel like I'm like wrong for being, envious of people that can just coast. But I know that I could take pride in the work that I'm putting into whatever job I'm putting in. Even if there is that little bit of bitterness or more than a little bit, there's of course gonna be that. But at the end of the day, I don't look at it as something that's unsalvageable, unconquerable. You got to climb that mountain. You can climb that mountain. You know, if it's Mount Everest, you could climb that. If it's fucking a mountain that can reach into the fucking the far reaches of space, we can climb that. Whatever it is, we can do it. But it's understandable to be bitter about things, to be complacent to an extent when you can't do anything immediately, but then regroup and then kind of go forward, but still be bitter, still be kind of annoyed and still bitter about what you have to do. Because what you want to do and what you have to do and what you can do are all three separate things, but they all come together in some way. And my point of no return would be if I just gave up completely, which is, like I said, a tempting option for people that just are tired of trying. They're tired of putting in the work. They're tired of feeling like nothing will ever change. And, you know, deleting yourself, so to speak, is not an option. And if it is, you got to seek help, talk to somebody, But I can't sit here and act like I am happy right now. I can't sit here and act like I'm content because I'm not. I'm gonna get there. As long as it takes to get there, I'm gonna do my best to get there. But I feel a hollowness inside when I think about the 8 years that I put in and how financially I was fucking up, but everything else I was checking off the box with flying colors. And I can't feel as proud as I'd like to be because of that financial aspect, but I still am proud. I helped people. I was there for people and with their their nutritional, food needs. I delivered people their food, got mostly elderly people, I was able to be there for them in that way, and I was happy about that. When I was like, cuz I had gotten to the city that I'm in. I'm gonna just say Gotham. I got to Gotham, right? I got to Gotham, and Batman wasn't there. Nobody was fucking there. No Bat family, nothing, right? So I get to Gotham after a, fucked up situation where some guy thought I stole weed from him. Sucker punched me, jaw got fucked up, all this shit, right? That's beside the point, though. I get into Gotham, and I'm like, okay, like I got to regroup, and I start regrouping, and I eventually, at the start wasn't doing well. And then we get to 2017, and I'm approached by, this organization that I was working with at the time, that they had a job that they thought would be a good fit for me. So I said, okay, sure. What you got? They forward me to like this place that delivers food to people. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. So I worked there for 8 years, from February of 2017 to March 31st of 2025. And I feel good about it by the end of it. But throughout a pandemic, I was called back when the pandemic was still going on, and, people were getting stimulus checks and all this stuff. And Gotham, it ain't exactly a place you want to be in. So I'm out here, struggling as you might be in the streets of Gotham. And I'm just struggling, I'm just making things work as best I can, but I get through what I'm getting through, and I'm like, all right, I got this. So I do the job and I feel good about it by the end of it. And then, not knowing that it's the end of it, it gets taken away from me just like that. Sure, I was expecting to leave my job by the end of this year, but then it's just stolen from me. That opportunity to just have a good exit and go to the next job and transition, that's stolen from me because of some fucking piece of shit that isn't worth the fucking air that he breathes. And it's like, what's left for me then? What's left for me? And I could understand why I freaked out, because other than not attending to other things in my life that I had talked about here, I was also struggling with over relying on weed. I was like smoking it too much. I was like, oh man, I don't even want to be sober. I don't even want to be sober. Fuck it. I wasn't gonna drink. I wasn't gonna go down that path, but I was like, nah, I don't even want to be sober, man. I don't even want to think about it. Got that in control. But then I had my own mother leave me in 101-degree weather because of a decision I made to go get weed at the time. And I told her, hey, like, I'm doing this because of, I need to quit it. I need to get one more eighth or whatever, though it sounds ridiculous. I know. I had to get one more eighth to go and, get it out of my system. Cleanse the system and be done with it for a while, But I understood where she was coming from. She was like, oh, I don't want you to make this decision. Tried to explain it to her. And you know how parents are sometimes. They'll try as best they can, but if they don't get it, they don't get it. They'll make a decision. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but you got to deal with it. And, I love my mother to death, of course. But when I'm left in 101-degree weather because of a decision I made to better myself, basically, and stop relying on it, which, sure, I could go, smoke up. Yeah, yeah. But it's not going to be relied on as much as it was with my job, because 8 years I worked at that job and I relied too much on smoking weed and doing the usual routine, and I stagnated and got too comfortable, and which is why she ended up saying, I feel like you've settled. And I did, to an extent. I settled for that shitty routine that I had kind of made for myself, you know. It was okay because I justified it, but that doesn't make it good. And I understood that. But when I was left in 101-degree weather and I had heat exhaustion and I'm collapsed in my own house doorway, I'm collapsed and I can't breathe. I can't draw in breath. I realized that, even if they did care, they didn't really come to help me, and that was very effective to me. It really demoralized me more. And I'm not going to blame, my mother for that, although I was at the time bitter. She did what she did. But who I would blame when it comes to my circumstances is, one, myself for part of it, but also some dumbass in the White House who literally took my job. Motherfuckers over here talking about these people are taking our jobs and all this shit. Yet he takes my job, and other people's jobs. Hundreds of people lose their jobs because some dude can't think. Think, Trump, think. He can't think. And that's why I lose my shit. So I can't help but feel like, damn, could that assassin have done a better job at fucking taking care of business and get this motherfucker out of here? Yeah, I feel that way unapologetically. Unapologetically, because what the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? And I can't sit here and, like I said, act like I'm happy about any of it. All I can do is move forward. But when you're nearly 30 and your living situation is what it is, where I'm living with my mother and my aunt, which is embarrassing, of course, to an extent, depending on how you look at it. And I'm out here wanting to change myself for the better, wanting to make things work as best they can. And I can't help but be emotional, I can't help but take off my glasses and look in the camera and say, I am doing the best I can, and I'm going to continue to do that. And when I put them back on, knowing that, we will do what we can. But your determination can only get you so far. And I can't sit here and smile and act like I'm super happy, because I'm just not, I'm just not. And like I said, I'll get there. I ain't gonna give up. It ain't in my vocabulary. Do or die. We ride it out. We make it work. But I can't sit here and act like what happened wasn't deeply affecting my ability to move forward. And when you're at a point where you're at a crossroads, all you can do is really think about it. Really think about what path you're going on, what path you're trying to go down. And it's okay to take a second, and I mean a second, maybe even 30, maybe even a couple minutes, maybe even an hour, but no more than that, because you gotta get on the move, right? To take that time to regroup. And I'm just at a loss of what to do. I try to get another job, and I'm told basically that the application process is going to take so long that I'm going to feel like a fish out of water, and I'm about to die, very close to dying. You got that fucking point of no return creeping up on you. And it just doesn't feel like there's any hope. Does that mean I'm not going to try? Of course, I'm going to try. But do or do not. and as Yoda would say, and I'm gonna do what I can do. I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna do everything in my power to be where I want to be, as anybody should. I'm not gonna tear down everything and give up. I gotta build things back up. I gotta make things work as best I can, and that's the only thing that I can do. But it's inevitable when you feel the depression creeping in and the self-loathing potentially and all of this negative stuff creeping into your head, digging into your subconscious, gnawing into all that good that you're trying to cultivate and keep going and keep going and keep moving forward. It's a tough road. It's a tough life to lead in that situation, but you got to do it. But you got to do it. And I'm at a loss for words, which is rare for me, at really describing how fucked up all of that is, really, when it feels like there's not much you can do other than just, do what you can and take the W's where you can, get the wins where you can, and keep it pushing. You know, it's a very odd feeling to just completely disconnect from reality when you don't need to in that situation, because it's like, you got to keep yourself grounded. Disconnecting completely and just going and focusing on whatever you got to focus on, the money, whatever it is, or the lack thereof sometimes. All of it kind of amounts to maybe nothing, maybe something, it's hard to really describe it. Because when I go and I look for a job in the community, all I'm left with is, be a body, be a number, on the checklist, be a good little soldier and do what your function is to do. Don't be individual, don't be unique. And even if you can stomach that, there's not much else you can do. So you just got to keep going. That's all you can do, right?